Greetings, Exiles, I'm Gav. Welcome to episode 2 in our Path of Exile 2 Reddit recap series. This week we're diving into some of the strengths and weaknesses of patch 0.1.1. We'll also talk about build diversity woes throughout the community, unfair boss fights, and much more. Let's get started. Starting off with community sentiment towards patch 0.1.1, which brought a ton of good changes, namely the checkpoint system in maps, the ability to now change out socketed runes, citadel visibility in the endgame, loot filters for console players, and more. Personally, my favorite change of the patch was the rune socket flexibility. Being able to buy pieces of gear that are already socketed, or being able to change my own sockets around after I've purchased a piece of gear is just phenomenal. What was the most impactful change in this patch for you? While there's loads of positive changes we could list off, patch 0.1.1 wasn't without its issues. In a post by the user named Cowslayer, whose findings were documented shortly after the patch launched, showing that the astral projection change to totems apparently broke their AI. This resulted in the totems not attacking unless there was an enemy nearby, which was an indirect nerf to tons of warriors running totems without the astral projection support gem. GGG fixed this overnight shortly after this was discovered, so totem boys rejoice. Armor's still in a horrible place after this minuscule 15% buff. Also, due to how armor is calculated and applied to monsters using the same formula, monsters received the same 15% armor increase that was applied to us. Thus, melee physical skills were indirectly nerfed as part of this change. Kriparian put out a great video going over this change and its detriment, and I'll have a link to that in the description if you're interested. Warrior still needs a lot of love, as does their section of the passive tree, which can be shown in this image here. All in all, however, this patch was a huge W, and I'm excited for the next major update. Next, let's talk about build diversity. Diversity amongst builds was already an issue before patch 0.1.1, but it's becoming even more exacerbated due to no large balance changes being put forth in the patch. I suspect GGG is waiting for the next major content update to perform all of their tuning and tweaks, but currently build diversity is at an all-time low. A meme post by Lum's Dreams summed up the state of builds nicely. It's the Harry Potter meme where Professor McGonagall's asking why whenever a new build is posted, it's always you three. And it shows Hermione, Ron, and Harry wearing Temporalis, Astramenus, and the Howa gloves. I'd argue that Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder could be included here for all attack builds, and Archmage for nearly any spell build that's put together. Despite GGG's attempt at a rich and diverse build economy, the balance just isn't there yet. Add to the fact that we're still missing over half of the weapons, skills, uniques, and ascendancies, and there's not much room for creativity right now. Nearly every new build that's posted might seem interesting on the surface, but once you actually dig into the build, it always boils down to one of the aforementioned skills, auras, and unique items powering the build. As a hipster build creator myself, this has been really tough to navigate. But if you're interested in something a little different, I've put out build overviews on both my crit Flameblast Blood Mage as well as my latest build, Poison Flameblast Pathfinder, using the recently changed Plaguefinger gloves. I do my best to stay out of the meta as much as I can, but right now build creativity just feels stifled. Comment down below with your favorite build that you've played so far during early access, as well as any balance changes that you hope to see in the next patch to address these outliers. Next up, a user by the name of Beware of Cat posted a simple but elegant solution to the gem stash tab issue of becoming full so quickly. All that needs to be done is to make multiples of uncut gems of the same level stack. The top comment by Juniper Leafs also had a great suggestion, stating that cutting a gem from your stash should place the cut gem in your inventory if space is available, rather than it being put in the stash and making you search for it in all this mess. I'm in full support of a change like this, as my gem stash tab has been full for weeks now, and honestly it's a complete mess. I have a separate tab for all the support gems as there's just no space to store them in the premium gem stash tab. Please GGG, save us from this madness. What do you all think about a change like this, W or L? Moving on to Path of Building, the amazing in-depth calculation and build creation tool that many of you may know from the original Path of Exile game. Local Identity and team has recreated this for Path of Exile 2. A redditor by the name of Lycanthrope90 wrote about their first experiences with this new tool. They gained around 20k DPS and could see actual gains and losses from their pathing on the tree, as well as gym choices and otherwise. They urged the community not to sleep on Path of Building, and I'd like to echo that sentiment. All of the calculations and work put into the development of this tool are taken straight from the database and are far more accurate than the in-game tooltips. If you're looking to improve your build, path more efficiently on the tree, or even theorycraft a build that you haven't even created in-game yet, PoB has it all. I'll have links in the description to the latest release of Path of Building 2, as well as a guide by Gazzy TV that does a solid job outlining how to use this super powerful tool. On the topic of sequels and Path of Exile 1 tools being brought to PoE 2, Uber Scion posted on Reddit regarding the popular tool from PoE 1 called PoE Ninja being brought to Path of Exile 2. It's currently under development. This website taps into GGG's API to provide data on the builds of non-private profiles that are positioned on the ladder in terms of experience gained. It aggregates all of this data into a nice visualization and allows sorting builds by skills, uniques, and notables when searching through. It taps into the economy data as well to provide up-to-date information on the current prices of uniques, currency exchange rates, and otherwise. It's mostly used to search through and find interesting build ideas or interactions to expand on, or completely yoink. It's also a really good snapshot of build popularity throughout a league. Just a wonderful community resource all around. Are you guys as excited about this coming to PoE 2 as I am? Our final story for this week sparked a lot of debate amongst the community. In a post by Dr. Omi, they showcased themselves dying to an off-screen mechanic in the Arbiter of Ash boss fight. They stated that adding more portals and thus multiple attempts to the fight doesn't address this unfairness. By the look of the comments in the post, this sentiment was almost unanimously agreed upon. The visual clarity of the fight is bad, the visual indicators of the mechanics are extremely hard to see, and the frequency of these one-shot mechanic phases is just too much. I personally have all the Citadel fragments needed to fight the Arbiter, I just haven't tried it yet. I've been too busy making builds. I'm onto my nearly 5th level 90 character. I'm working on Titan Warrior right now. The portions of the fight that I have seen do seem a bit ridiculous though, especially for melee characters or casters using channeled abilities. This post also sparked a lot of debate on the necessity for one-shot mechanics, and I've been swayed to agree. There needs to be more time than a single heartbeat to react to mechanics like this. And I'd have to find the interview, but wasn't their intent with this slower, more methodical gameplay in Path of Exile 2, trying to avoid the need for one-shots altogether? It's starting to feel a lot like Path of Exile 1, where you're either dead or alive, with no in-between, and little to no room for recourse. I hope GGG takes a harder look at this development decision and makes the fights and mechanics more fun and engaging, without the need for failure of a single mechanic to result in immediate death. But as always, I'd love to hear your opinions down in the comments on boss fights, one-shots, and in particular the Arbiter of Ash fight. Before we wrap up this week's Reddit recap, I'd like to end off each episode with my top pick of the many Reddit memes that are shared every week on the Path of Exile 2 subreddit. This week's top meme was posted by me. I can't pronounce that name. The title is "Me crafting for 2 days straight with a gif of old folks spamming slot machines." The depiction of crafting being a complete gamble really hits close to home, and I'm obligated to agree. The current crafting system does leave a lot to be desired in terms of determinism. Right now, quote-unquote crafting really is just the roll of the dice. Omens are still economically out of reach for most and still far too rare, and essences are basically all we've got. And for some reason, they seem to be programmed to always hit bad mods, at least in my experience. I don't think I've ever seen maximum life when using a life essence. It's always life on kill or life leech, and I've used over 50 essences on random rings and jewelry during my playtime. I do appreciate that ground loot feels valuable, but I think a lot more could be done with the tiered loot, and I miss the sense of agency that the crafting bench provided. The rune system doesn't do a great job of completely invalidating the crafting bench from PoE 1, even with the change to allow us to overwrite runes. Maybe this will get changed with more soul cores in the future or more rune options in the future, but for now it just feels a little bit underwhelming. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Reddit recap. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments to weigh in on any of the topics we covered in this episode. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe for more Path of Exile 2 content on my channel, and I'll see you all next week. Farewell.